Legends tell of a mystical place, forged of might and magic, where knights performed deeds of valor and bravery, where outlaws and magical creatures filled the forests, where witches and wizards vie for control with mere mortals, where castles and heroes are made. This is a world of ages past. This is Avalon.
Some legends claim that Avalon is an island somewhere off the coast of Europe. Other tales suggest that in some realms it is a planet unto itself. Sometimes called Ashlar, this world orbits a distant star and has at least 4 moons. The story of this faraway place begins with scales and fire. Since the beginning of time, dragons have called this land home. Perhaps the mightiest of these were the lava dragons who slumbered beneath the earth. If awakened, they could shatter Avalon in two. When beheaded, such lava dragons may birth smaller, black dragons. Other dragons laid clutches of golden eggs which would one day be highly prized by those brave enough to plunder the dragon nests. These were defended by the mythical Red Wing, the Fire Queen. The dragons lent their name to the yellow dragonberries that grew on the highest peaks, which they used as food and medicine. Though dangerous, they were intelligent, with a common tongue that could be understood among all their kind. The ancient dragons were only the earliest of the magical creatures who came to call Avalon home. Fairy kings and queens held court in the enchanted forest, which was also home to tree men, leaflings, gremlins, and ogres. Pixies and all manner of other magical creatures crept and frolicked among the dark forests and hidden glens. Beneath them all, an empire of dwarves thrived in the caverns and tunnels deep below the ground. The eldest of these dwarves were as old as the mountains themselves. They were ruled by a mighty king who held court in the Dwarven Hall. The dwarf clans kept to the underground. This was partially by inclination, for dwarves cared little for the outside world, but also out of fear, for above ground was still the domain of dragons. The dwarves lived to mine gold, silver, and precious gemstones, all of which were coveted by the mighty winged beasts from above. But not every dragon was to be feared. While the larger red dragons stole treasures for their own purposes, the smaller green night dragons, so named because they often left their caves after sundown, were known to be friendly. Ollie and Allie, a pair of ancient green dragons from the beginning of time, were the self-proclaimed protectors of children in their land. Sadly, the distinction between the friendly green dragons and the menacing red dragons would be lost in subsequent generations, as even the night dragons were exploited and corrupted by dark magicians. In time, humans came to Avalon, probably attracted by the favorable, almost miraculous living conditions there. According to Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing centuries later, it produces all things of itself. Of its own accord, it produces grain and grapes, and apple trees grow in its woods from the close-clipped grass. The ground of its own accord produces everything instead of merely grass, and people live there 100 years or more. The names of these ancient peoples are lost to history. They constructed their own temples and other structures, such as the mysterious Lego Henge, the oldest known minifigure-built structure in the universe. In the deep woods, an ancient tree was said to have brought peace and harmony to the land. It is possible this period of peace and coexistence was the time of the fabled unified realm, when the land was united. In time, these all fell to ruin, their true purpose forgotten. Some of them still bear the psychic stain of evil sorcerers such as Rezera the Ancient, one of many dark wizards who have plagued Avalon for millennia. To the northwest, the Elflands were home to all manner of elfish peoples, from the small-statured tinkerers of the elfish forges to the mighty warriors who defended against the dragons, and worse. Tales from the distant land of Heroica may speak to the origin of the monsters plaguing the inhabitants of Avalon during this time. They speak of goblins, werewolves, and vampires pouring from interdimensional portals in force, possibly from the plane of existence known as the Monster Realm. During this time, hordes of these monsters threatened Heroica and were driven back by the use of sacred relics. These invasions, taking place over the course of centuries, seem to be the work of a hidden mastermind from another realm. During one of the later incursions, this villain dispatched a goblin king and a vampire lord to seize the kingdom of Enon in the land of Heroica. Though they were defeated by heroes wielding the rediscovered sacred relics, this was only the first stage of the invasion. For centuries, the humans and magical inhabitants of the land endured the lawless wasteland created by the dragons and other monsters. A group of Saxons settled in the valley called Saxondale, possibly around this time. One day, a humble farmer, Augustin Halbert, decided he'd had enough. He gathered together 7 of the bravest, strongest, and most interesting citizens he could find, and united them to fight back against the evils that plagued their land. This group became known as the Order of the Eight, and their struggle was a long and difficult one. None of the 8 were warriors. Their ranks included future scholar Reginald Barkland and the birdcatcher Therence Richmond. But what they lacked in experience, they made up for in determination. They taught themselves how to fight and strategize, and formed bonds of loyalty and honor among themselves that proved unbreakable. While they began their fight with humble tools, it seems that the humans who battled the mighty dragons were later aided by magical weapons, possibly from the land's supernatural inhabitants. Many such magical blades were known as the Swords of Virtue. One mighty sword was forged to be the strongest ever made, the mere sight of which would cause any dragon to turn tail. According to legend, it was capable of defeating a dragon in a single blow. In later generations and in royal hands, this sword was known as the Lion Sword, Lion Heart, or, most famously, Excalibur. Other magical swords were known to be passed down to future rulers, such as the Golden Sword of King Rivet, which could summon magical chains, and the Hero's Sword of Middle Zealand. One of these magical weapons was said to spiral up from the depths of ancient wells when needed. This legend may be connected to the tragic figure of the Water Princess, who was frozen in time over her crystal dish in the area where the Dragon Knight's castle stands today. Her sister, the old witch Mythical, still travels the land in an unexplained rage. Both women can still be found haunting the Dragon Knight's castle, though which can be trusted is just as mysterious as the events that divided them. In time, Augustin and his forces were able to drive the dragons away from the human settlements to mountain peaks. The last battle took place in the Badlands, where the Order of 8 defeated the Brownwater Brood. The clans of trolls and goblins, possibly remnants of the invasion of Heroica, were pushed back and settled across the sea. Here they regrouped, building ships with hulls made from the trunks of giant ironbark trees, a process that took over a year for each ship. They decorated the vessels with the tusks of the doom boars of Ash Mountain, and the red sails became notorious as they prowled the entire world, pillaging and plundering as they went. With the dragons and other monsters at bay, the humans began building their own kingdoms, and may have forged alliances with the dwarves during this time. The magical swords were hidden away once again in wells, woods, and wizards' towers. It was also during this time that the first knights appeared in Avalon. Traditionally, knights were mounted elite soldiers who served a ruler, receiving land and influence in return. In these early centuries, horses were scarce. Many knights had to build their own, a tradition reflected generations later in the national tournaments of Morcia, and still practiced in some kingdoms and noble houses. If the myths are to be believed, the earliest such soldiers were created long before the time of the Order of 8. Approximately a zillion years ago, the Fright Knights were created to serve in the eternal conflict between the first 2 minifigures in existence. They had fought for generations on Lego Island on behalf of their creator, the Brickster, against the good knights of the Brickster's benevolent counterpart, the Infomaniac. The ancient order of the Fright Knights eventually found its way to Avalon, settling in a forested area known thereafter as Brixylvania, possibly in tribute to their maker. But before their arrival, the first knights in the land were Augustin Halbert and his order. Augustin became the first king of a country that would become known as Knighton. Such was the reputation and influence of his knights. Halbert wasn't just concerned with his military strength. He also asked each of his 7 warriors to contribute a statement or command to express their best behavior and conduct. These 8 statements became known as the Knight's Code, an influential and long-lasting creed. Most of the order became the founders of Knighton, with Reginald Barkland joining with the legendary wizard Gornbarf the Great to create an institution that eventually became the famed Knights Academy. Therence, the Feather Sword Richmond, founded the town of Oremville and used his position to gain wealth and influence, creating a noble house that would endure for generations. One knight, possibly one of the Order of the 8, sought a different path. Orlan may have started out as a simple blacksmith, but he was known to the knights that followed him as the First Knight. Together they built a great fortress, the Citadel of Orlan, where they intended to live apart from the world. Here they would hone their skills and work to better themselves through training and isolation. They trained in the 4 disciplines of wisdom, agility, strength, and speed. The period of peace that saw the philosophy of knighthood flourish was not to last, as a dark figure rose to power. Legends say that this man called himself the Great Sorcerer, and that he came from another dimension entirely. If true, this may have been the same mastermind behind the periodic interdimensional incursions in Heroica. Some have identified him as the Darkitect, a corrupted explorer and noble named Baron Typhonus from a future realm. The sorcerer set his sights on Ancoria, one of the most prosperous kingdoms of its time and known for its magnificent towers and palaces. But it was all destroyed, wiped clean by the wrath of the sorcerer in his bid for ultimate power. In time, the great sorcerer had conquered the entire known world. He then turned his attention to the Knights of the Citadel, who could remain isolated no longer. Though the sorcerer's territory and resources were vast, the brave knights dug in and held out against his attacks. The battles against the sorcerer caused the land around the Citadel to become barren and misshapen. Even the animals grew mutated and fearsome. This area became known as the Desolate Moorlands. For centuries, strange metals, the debris of unknown weapons and magics, could be found littering the all but impassable moor. Orlan knew that his followers could only fight magic with magic. He and his knights journeyed to the hidden magical region known as the Mistlands. Here, in an isolated stone tower, Orlan drew upon the combined powers of all of the Citadel's knights to form the Shield of Ages, a powerful defensive totem. Whispered rumors suggest that the heart of the shield was powered by the imprisoned spirits of dark wizards defeated by the knights. It was said that whoever held the shield could defeat any enemy. With the fate of the world at stake, Orlan and his knights challenged the sorcerer, and a great battle was fought. The Shield of Ages was shattered by the sorcerer, with its pieces being scattered throughout Ancoria, but the heart of the shield remained and the sorcerer was defeated. The menacing magician was imprisoned in a crystal ball and hidden away in the Mistlands Tower. The sorcerer's kingdom became lost, and Orlan returned to his home after hiding the heart of the shield in the Citadel, protected by 4 great challenges. Orlan went on to found a kingdom, just as Halbert had done. But while Halbert's kingdom would be ruled by his own family for over millennia, Orlan instead began a tradition of holding a grand tournament, the winner of which would become the new king of the country known as Morcia. When Orlan's time came and the new king was crowned, Orlan vanished from Morcia. Unbeknownst to anyone, he had returned to the Mistlands to protect the tower and await the day when the Shield of Ages could be forged anew. While Morcia was isolated from the rest of the land by the desolate moorlands, it was a bastion against evil and darkness. Its rulers and knights wielded magical armor and lightning swords that were forbidden to be used outside the tournament arena. Such magic could only be dreamed of by those outside its borders. The codes of Knighton and Morcia would ensure that the land would be one of knights and bravery for generations to come. But while both kingdoms were vast, they were also isolated, with much of the land remaining scarred and uninhabitable, save for the remnant kingdom of the West. Here the elders collected the knowledge remaining from the former unified realm. The remainder of Avalon was a blank slate for anyone with a noble heart and a grand vision to build upon. Centuries later, one such ruler would be destined to rise to the challenge, shaping the fate of Avalon for generations to come. If you liked hearing about the world of LEGO Castle, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more LEGO Castle lore very soon.